This time from a garage in a home in Silverdale, which is near Seattle, home of the 2014 Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. This is Field of Steve. This is a webcast. It is being recorded live, but that does not mean that you are hearing me live. I am live supposedly on Sunday, but in reality I'm recording this episode from my garage because as I have mentioned on previous shows, and actually I should say a previous show, because I've only had one webcast of Field of Steve. I am my day job is as a reporter for the Kitsap Sun newspaper in Bremerton, Washington. That's how most folks in Kitsap County would know me. And even though I am pre-recording this, I am really not going to edit myself, so you're going to hear my verbal miscues, such as stammering over words like Bremerton, Bremerton, whatever you want to call this town. And actually, it's not even this town, because I'm in Silverdale. Last week, I did my first live show. It was recorded at the home in East Bremerton, Washington, home of Edge Media Source, where shows like The Raw Nerve, the Outlaw Radio Network, and the explicitly naughty show The Last Call are also recorded and aired live on edgemediasource.com. If you're hearing this on Edge Media Source, chances are you are taking the opportunity to hear it live. I don't know who the one or two of you are who are taking this opportunity, but thank you for listening in. And I hope to provide you with a couple of hours of an entertaining and enlightening story. That's what we do here. I tell stories. The whole purpose of this show is to tell stories. Basically, it gets down to the idea that when all the power goes out and all the lights are off and we're all sitting around by a campfire someday when there's been some sort of heavenly occurrence that has caused a power grid to just shut down, all we'll have left to entertain ourselves and to enlighten ourselves are our music and our stories. And so I hope to get good at this so that when that day comes, my services will be highly valued. I can write stuff still. I could probably write stuff, but it'll take a pen and a paper, and who knows how we'll manufacture all of that when all of the power is out and our computers aren't working and we're no longer able to hear the Edge Media Source. This, for the next couple of months at my day job, which as again I might mention is as a reporter for the Kitsap Sun newspaper, I will be working weekends. So I will be pre-recording the show from inside the garage. Again, kind of live for me. As I'm recording this, it's early. It's after midnight. It is early Saturday morning. According to my computer, it's 12:39 a.m. and I am judiciously watching the clock so that I tell these stories within certain segments that have been told to me that will work by the good folks at Edge Media Source, mostly Caleb and Kevin Chambers. Last week I had the opportunity to, as I said, to do my first show. And before I get to that, before I do a decompress on that, I want to share with you that I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your emails if you have suggestions for the show or if you have questions about any of the content, which, believe me, after today's story, you just might. You might have questions that I'd love to share the answers to those questions on the show, whether I take them seriously or not. It's an open invitation. My email address is Stephen@thenarrativearts.com. That's Stephen at thenarrativearts.com. And Stephen is with a V, Steven. Also, if you don't catch the show live, you can listen to it on Edge Media Source when they post it later, but also at my website, fieldofsteve.com. That's like Field of Dreams, only Field of Steve. Last week on the show, I learned a few things about doing a fake radio show, as the good folks at Too Beautiful to Live call their show, a fake radio show. A few things that I learned from it. One, having stories certainly helps fill time. And time is basically what you're trying to make good use of while you're talking to people on the air. The second thing I learned was having someone to talk to helps fill the time. And that's not something I'm going to have for the next couple of months as I record these shows from my garage or wherever else I might choose to record the show. And in fact, on that, I'm open to ideas. I would actually like to record in different locations throughout Kitsap County or anywhere. I loved going to Seattle to record the show. I'd set up shop in the ferry terminal if that would work. And most likely it would be the reason I would do it is related to whatever we're talking about, but it doesn't have to be. I could just set up shop and have people come ask me what the heck I'm doing, and hopefully they won't be doing it while I'm still recording live. But as I said before, having someone to talk to helps fill the time. And last week, I had Kevin Chambers, you might know him as K-Dog, in the studio, or on the other side of the glass for me in the studio. He was the producer of last week's show, and he's actually making sure that this show gets posted on the site. A couple other things I learned is you really appreciate those breaks because it's those times that you get to take care of perhaps physiological issues. And for me, it was mostly burping. But also, when I left the house last week and was on my way home, it was a good opportunity to do the other kind of, and you'll notice this is the kind of thing that makes me stammer. The other kind of release, shall we say. And there's a couple of things that are also true. When you're doing something like this and you're constantly watching the clock and you're trying to figure out how to fill time, time does move pretty darn slow. At the end of each segment, though, it felt like I was having to rush to get my final words in, scrambling to get everything I wanted to say within the time frame. And that's actually a good thing. When I left last week, I felt like I probably could have done it longer, though I'm sure if there's anybody out there who listened to it for the whole 2 hours, I'm sure you'd disagree and you'd probably tell me that 2 hours was more than enough. Even though I know the show, the story was absolutely riveting and compelling and something you would hope to see in a book form. And on that, I can assure you that your prayers are answered because I have written the Jane story, and it does appear in a book. And the book is called Spill Your Guts Guts. It is available on Amazon. Amazon's probably the best way for you to get it. It's the least expensive way because they will typically reduce the price when you buy the print book. And when you buy the print book, you can get the Kindle version for $1. The Kindle version typically sells for $4.99, but if you buy the print version and the Kindle version, you can get the Kindle version for $1, plus Amazon will reduce the price. Now, you will have to pay for shipping. And if you want a signed version of the book, you either have to find me and push the book in front of me, or you can order one from me at thenarrativearts.com. I hope you know how to spell narrative. thenarrativearts.com. You can see how to get a signed copy. I'll either ship one to you, or if you email me at steven@thenarrativearts.com, I can arrange to meet you if you live nearby. The final thing I learned last week, though, was that this stuff is really kind of fun. And being able to talk, even right now, as I'm sitting in my garage and it's 12:45 at night, I'm having a good time. There's something about engaging in a conversation that you suspect somebody might hear that's pretty darn cool. So, and it is no secret to me now why people get hooked on the idea of doing talk shows, and it's no secret to me now why Kevin and Paul talked for years about trying to get their own radio station going, and then did it. Found ways to do it, found ways to get equipment on trade, and duct tape, and soundproofing for a room, and to find a place to set up shop. I have no question why they did it. It is a lot of fun. And it is so fun that I have another friend who lives out of state who I just saw on Facebook tonight is buying equipment because it appears he is going to set up his own talk show out of his own residence. It's something he has had a talk show on the radio on a small station somewhere in Utah in the past. that business is hellish. And so it is no surprise to me when people get out of it. And in fact, a lot of shows that I like don't last. As I mentioned last week, I was a big fan of Too Beautiful to Live. It was a show that was on Cairo for about a year and a half, and they went to podcast, and they no longer have to worry about ratings keeping the show going. They do have to worry about getting listeners because they rely on listeners for income and that kind of thing, but that's another story. So speaking of stories, I want to go ahead and start with this week's story at this point. I've wasted enough of your time on the intros and those kind of things. And then later on, after I'm done telling this story, I'm going to waste your time with some other things. But I'll start 20 years ago. I was working for a book publisher out of Oregon. It's a job I did for a year, and there's actually a nice piece of storytelling that can come with the fact that I was able to get work there. But it was a niche publisher. They had started out with doing photo books. They did a photo book about Hawaii, and then they got into some of the self-improvement, self-help, kind of new agey stuff. And an author approached them. His name was Arnold Patent, and he had written a book called You Can Have It All. And in his book, he had self-published it and had sold 100,000 copies, which I can tell you is just unheard of, especially back then, except that he had the means to pay for publishing the book and to market it. And he was a persistent salesman of that book. And he decided to find a home for it. And so he approached the company I was working for, Beyond Words Publishing, out of Hillsboro, Oregon. And he got them to agree to publish it. And they had a relationship that worked at times, and sometimes it didn't. But they proceeded to go ahead and try to get this book out there. After getting the book out there, and after me not noticing a mistake that was on the cover of the book, and there are no accidents, forward, when you are moving somewhere, is spelled Forward. A forward in a book, say when it says forward by John Gray, which is what the cover of You Can Have It All said. John Gray was the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. When a book says forward there, it is spelled Foreword. I had to think about the last four letters there. In either case, the key letters that were wrong were the FOR, and there was no E, and it was spelled forward like you're moving forward. Well, in the context of the book, it seemed fine. Nobody noticed it. I wasn't the only one who messed up on that one. Anyway, the book goes out, and one of the things that Arnold Patent's basic point is that abundance is the natural state of the universe. That when we are not in abundance, when we are not wealthy, is because we are doing things to actively prevent abundance from coming forward in our lives. And along the way, he starts talking about children, about how children are mirrors of ourselves, and that when we become upset with our children, we are becoming upset with parts of ourselves that we don't like. So, for example, when your child has been up way too long and is grumpy and is yelling at you, there is something that child is demonstrating that is a mirror of you. And I don't know if he went into the reasons for this, but there are a few logical reasons why that would seem to make sense. For one, the only people that our children have to model themselves after are us, initially. Mom and dad. Particularly mom. Mom not only is the person most often, in most families, who spends the most time with the child, mom's the one who carries the child. And who knows what kind of learning is done in the womb. There have been studies on this, and people have come to different conclusions. But certainly mom and dad have an influence. and children learn to behave from their parents. Now, I believe they come with their own traits, but everything we see in our children are probably things that, if we think hard enough, we can see in ourselves. And that is why we get so frustrated. So it's with this story in mind that there comes a story about one of my children. And it's a story of a crisis that this child went through. And it takes a little bit of a backstory to get there. Last week I had a pretty easy time, fairly easy time, filling up the space I had on the radio show in the 2 hours, because the Jane story is one I've told several times. I told it on a podcast before. I'd written it before. I'd rewritten it for the book slightly. I'd told it in public settings. This is not a story that I've told from beginning to end, and I'm operating on memory more than I am any kind of outline. I know where this story begins, and I know where it ends. Getting there is going to be a bit of a journey. After reading that in Arnold Patton's book, now I was 32, 33 years old when I read Mr. Patton's thoughts on our relationship with our children, and I was still single, and to my absolute knowledge, in other words, there's no doubt about this, I had no children anywhere else. As I may have mentioned before, I served a Mormon mission, and even though I wasn't married and I was 32 years old and I had dated, I can tell you with absolute certainty that there were no accidents out there. I left Oregon after that year and thought of all the lessons that I had learned from Arnold Patton's book. And it is a book I would recommend, by the way. You can have it all. There are great lessons to consider. And I moved back to Utah, where I had been living before. After I went on my mission, I went to BYU. And my last semester of college, my parents moved up to Utah. And I didn't have a job, so I basically stayed with my parents, found a job in Utah, and had ended up staying there much longer than I had ever planned to, and still not finding somebody to marry. So I moved to Oregon. I have a year there. I have a kind of inglorious exit from the job that I was telling you about. And I'm at a decision point as to whether I go back to Utah, where all my friends and family are, not all of them, all the ones except for the ones in Utah, or excuse me, in Oregon, or do I stay in Oregon with this new set of friends? Somehow it became clear to me that I had learned all I needed to learn in my trip in Oregon. When I moved there, I never thought I would leave. And here I was a year later, deciding that maybe it was time to go back and pursue some options that would probably be available to me that hadn't been before. So I decided to move back to Utah. And within a year, I had found somebody that I wanted to marry, and who coincidentally had decided she wanted to marry me. It was great the way it worked out. That had never happened before. Well, I take that back. It had actually happened 3 times before with 2 different women. I was engaged to one woman once for a couple of weeks, and then another one twice for a month or 2. And all of those relationships broke down. But this one was going to work, and we got engaged and we got married on June 1st, 1996. And so if you're doing the math at home, we are nearing 18 years. And we had talked about having children, but initially our thought was we would wait a couple of years. And probably for reasons of religion, I was working for a mortgage company, and I got to talking with somebody else who shares our religion, and he shared with me some thoughts that I had not really agreed with before, but considered, and I still think that some of the things can be taken too far. But this was someone who had many children, was going to have many more children, and looking at it biblically, could see no reason not to. And so after we had been married, after Diana and I had been married about 7 months, I asked if she might be willing to reconsider our plans to wait a couple of years before having a child, before getting pregnant. And I can't say it was necessarily my friend's talk, but the friend's talk with me did influence me to reconsider my thoughts on the issue. And there was the other issue that I was 34 years old, and I found myself wondering, how long do I want to put this off? So I had a talk with Diana. We discussed it, and she readily was willing and able to become a parent sooner than we had expected. And so about a little more than a year after we got married, we learned that Diana was pregnant, and we were about to have our first child. And I'll tell you the story about all of that when we return in our next segment.
The Kitsap Humane Society is an independent nonprofit committed to providing positive, life-changing solutions to people and companion animals. Our vision is that every adoptable animal has a home. In 2010, we rehomed 4,111 pets. For more information on our programs, services, and animals available for adoption, visit us on the web at kitsap-humane.org. Kitsap Humane Society. Rescue, rehabilitate, rehome.
The Yacht Club Broiler is Silverdale's premier dining establishment and has been for over 20 years. Come experience the Yacht Club Broiler's famous happy hour with a casual and friendly atmosphere. Free Wi-Fi service is now available. The Yacht Club Broiler is open 7 days a week for lunch and dinner at 9226 Bayshore Drive in Silverdale. The Yacht Club Broiler, Silverdale's premier dining establishment.
Judy's Sewing in East Bremerton is your one-stop shop for all your sewing, alteration, and clothing repair needs. At Judy's Sewing, you can also find tuxedo rentals and bridal party dresses for only $69 and bride's dresses starting at $189. Judy's Sewing at the corner of Fairgrounds Road and Central Valley in East Bremerton, near Handy Andy's, or call Judy at 360-662-1212. That's right, 360-662-1212 for Judy Sewing.
Heather Madden, former machinist, wins success as a skilled professional rock star.
No more working dusty old machine shops for me. Being the boss of my own professional rock band has improved my life in every way, and I owe it all to the cool gear at Kitsap Music.
What do you want? Substantial spare time? Groupies? Leather pants? Use only certified cool products. From Kitsap Music.
I'm Elaine Terso with Elaine Terso Photography. Operation Love Reunited is a special project for military members offering free photography sessions before a military member deploys, when they return home, or for special family photos to be sent to those stationed far from home. At Elaine Terso Photography, we are a proud supporter of Operation Love Reunited. If you or someone you know is active in the military and would like to take part in this free service, please visit me online at ElaineTersoPhotography.com.
So where was I? Oh yeah, Diana was pregnant. As I mentioned before, we were hell bent on becoming parents, despite all the evidence that we would not be suitable parents for any children. That's a joke. You feel free to laugh at that. My self-deprecating humor is designed to make you laugh, and if it doesn't, and don't think I take that seriously. I feel like I'm a perfectly fine father, and Diana, of course, is a tremendous mother. But as I said, despite all the evidence, again, with the self-deprecating humor, we decided that we wanted to be parents sooner than we had originally planned. And I found out, I went to a... Diana was going to California to visit her sister, and I decided to go go golfing, something I've done 4 or 5 times in my life. So this was kind of a momentous occasion, and she gave me a call because she had taken a pregnancy test while she was in California and found out that she was pregnant. And this, of course, leads to all the romantic things like going out and buying a Winnie the Pooh doll or something like that. Maybe it was Winnie the Pooh or Elmo. I think it was Winnie the Pooh, because I think my nephew got the Elmo doll. At any rate, it caused all of the celebrations that first-time parents have, not realizing what kind of work is in store. It is still a romanticized version there. You can tell yourself intellectually how this is going to go, but you just have no idea. One of the things we had always kind of, or I had always kind of believed was, that problems for kids, the problems you have with your kids, they're more frequent when they're little, but they're smaller, and then later on they're less frequent, but they are bigger, and that has proved to be more or less true. As they've gotten older, the frequency of the problems is less. The magnitude of the problems are somewhat bigger. At any rate, we were pretty darn excited about this, and so were my parents. Now, and I have to go into a little backstory here, but so far they had been grandparents before. Both of my brothers had successfully become parents of boys. My oldest brother has a son, and my other brother has 3 sons. And they were excited for us as well. Everybody's really excited. Family members having children, and it's not me. In this case, it was me. I was the one having a child. And for reasons I am not certain, I don't know for sure. I wanted a boy. I got to put my keys down here. I wanted a boy because for some sexist reason I thought it would be best to have a boy, being the oldest member of the family, because we pretty much figured that we weren't going to stop at one child. We were going to, we weren't going to quite have a quiver full, but you could look in the quiver and you could see some. Diana had always wanted a girl, and she had a name picked out already, and the name was Sarah. And it was because it was a name of a friend of hers from when she was younger, and this was a friend that she liked and always just loved the name. So if we were going to have a girl, the name was going to be Sarah. If we were going to have a boy, we didn't really have anything picked out, I don't think. And it takes a while before, you can find out the gender of the child, of course. I don't know if you're aware of this, but they have technology now where you can find out the gender of your child before it is born. And I've heard of one case recently where somebody was surprised. They had gone ahead and had that test done and had thought they were having a girl, and whoa, look at that, a boy. But in our case, we had no idea for a while, and my mom wanted us to have a girl. My mother, she was in her 60s. She was living up in Midway, Utah, which is up in the canyons between Provo and Salt Lake City. And Mom's wanting of a girl went back years. My mother was an only child, and there is a story there that will certainly take up 1 or 2 podcasts to tell all the stories of my mom and her upbringing with her mother, who was, just a heck of a woman in some terms. That's one way to describe her. My mother had, as I said, had grown up an only child and had experienced life with her mother. Her mother was a single mom, as it turned out. And the relationship my mother had with her mother was not the most ideal. And so when my mom was 17 years old, about to be 18, and just recently graduated from high school, she got the notion that getting married to my father would be a good idea. And they got married probably a week or so after she graduated from high school. Mom has said that her main impetus for wanting to get married was to get out of the house. To get out of the house with her mother. And before a couple of years, they had their first son. And in another couple of years, they had another son, 2 boys. And Mom wasn't supposed to be able to have children anymore. And then 8 years later, ta-da, I came out. Big surprise. And it is a fact that there was some misguided, ill-thought-out belief that I was going to be born a girl. And my mom's mother had purchased all kinds of presents for the girl that was supposed to be born. Now, I have nothing against girls. I like girls. That's kind of the way. It's always been that way for me. But I didn't want to be one. And so it wasn't like I resented this. It just seems kind of mysterious to me that my grandmother was so certain that my mom was going to have a girl. And my mom was fairly certain and really wanted a girl. And I don't think many parents are ever disappointed. It's not like the baby comes out and you go, oh, no, a boy. I've never heard of a parent doing that. There might be parents who think that. There are people who joke about that. But I don't know if a parent has ever done that. And as it turns out, my parents could not know the gender of me before I was born. And I've told a story on another podcast that had I been born a few days earlier, I would have been named John Glenn Gardner instead of Stephen Edward Gardner, because John Glenn circumnavigated the earth on February, I believe the date was February 20th, 1962. I was born on February 23rd. And in fact, on February 20th, my mom went into false labor with me, and so they had names picked out. I don't know what the girl's name would have been. When I was born and was a boy, I know the one person who did feel mad, or not mad, but sad or felt guilty was my grandmother. My grandmother felt bad that she had wished so hard for a girl. And she kind of, in some ways, doted on me a little bit. She kind of paid more attention to me than she did to my brothers over the years. And sometimes getting attention from that grandmother wasn't such a good thing. So it's not like that was all good news for me. But as we grew up, we were a family of 3 boys, and when I was born, my father said, "My 3 sons." That was the name of a television show that was popular at the time. We had Chip and Ernie and Robbie and Fred, somebody who was the father, and Uncle Charlie. That was a show that was famous on television. My dad said, "My 3 sons." It was, fitting for the moment. And my brothers doted on me, yada, yada, yada. I didn't know anything. I didn't know about any of these regrets about my gender for several years. But my mom worked as an admitting clerk at a hospital. And there were times when I would have to go to her work with her and do things and not complain about them like my son does, my youngest son, Apollo. He's a big complainer when he has to sit and just entertain himself without his DS. I was an underprivileged child and didn't have a DS in 1968. The thought that my mom might actually want a girl occurred to me one time when we were leaving the hospital, and she said, "Steve, do you think you'd want a sister?" Like, we could go to the store and order one. It had never occurred to me. I mean, I didn't know much about the birds and the bees, but I knew that you just didn't, ask, well, do you want one? That was one of those things that had to be kind of manufactured in a way, and you had to do some things. Though, again, I was 6, 7 years old. I didn't know what you had to do. I just knew it wasn't as easy as my mom was suggesting. But apparently she was willing to consider adopting a girl because she had always wanted a girl. And I don't know what influenced her out of it. Chances are in my family it was money, because that influenced a lot of the decisions. In fact, it's no small accident that not long after I was born, my dad got fixed, because they didn't want that happening anymore. And I know all about getting fixed. That's I've got nothing against that, and I never felt any resentment. In fact, my parents loved me just fine, even though they got fixed at it, because they sure weren't going to want another one. At any rate, I believe probably the practical measures, or the practical matters of having another child influenced my parents to not adopt another one. For years and years, this went on. Mom adapted really well to having a house full of boys. We were baseball fans, Dodger fans to be precise, but we all played baseball. And when I was 11 years old, I was playing Little League Baseball, and my mom was keeping score. There's, if you're not familiar with baseball, and it's a joke I make all the time on the podcast, if you're scoring at home, it's something Vin Scully used to say a lot, if you're keeping score at home, because people keep score. They keep track of who got singles, what pitches were balls and strikes, those kind of things. My mom was the scorekeeper for a team. And then that gradually meant, evolved into keeping score for every team. And so she would be there from Monday through Thursday and all day Saturday, keeping score for all the teams. And at the end of the season, she created these statistics, the batting averages in that. And this was at a time when we didn't have calculators. It's odd to think that. I mean, I have a smartphone that can tell you what 3 divided by 700 is, and I can have that answer for you in 3 seconds. Well, we had an adding machine, something that was called an adding machine, and it really seemed high tech, but it didn't know how to divide. This was an adding machine was something bookkeepers had because, basically you only added or subtracted money. You didn't divide it, or I suppose you could multiply it, but I think it could do that. My mom figured out a way to use that adding machine that did not have a division button, figured out how to make that thing come close to the percentages that were people's batting averages. Now, I knew how to divide and make those batting averages. I could draw it out on paper, and though close, they weren't exact, and I didn't really understand how Mom could be so imprecise. But I obviously appreciated the effort, and so did everyone else when she drove to the homes of about 120 different kids and dropped off their statistics from the year. It was an amazing feat that my mother did, and this was how she adapted to being in a home full of boys. She found a way that she loved participating. She loved her kids, and she made the most of it. And it was something that I mentioned last week, that Mom was in a bit of depression for a few years, and this might have been one of the things that helped her climb out of it. Finding a way to be useful. Mom did want to be needed. She had, at her funeral, she had the song "You Needed Me" sung, the old Anne Murray bit. The years went on, and my brothers, being older than I am, getting married before I did, and at a younger age than I did, they started having children long before I did. And this in the 80s, of course, you could determine what gender your child was going to be. And so when my oldest brother was, he and his wife were pregnant, they knew they were having a boy. My other brother, he and his wife adopted a couple of boys, and then later on, he remarried, because he and his first wife divorced, and he remarried, and he married a woman who had a son. So my parents had 4 grandchildren, all boys. So my mom was, not having her wishes fulfilled at all. For the ultrasound, we knew how excited my mom was, and Diana had made a point that she wanted my mom to be a part of the whole process as much as possible, which meant going to the ultrasound or the whatever, and maybe ultrasound isn't the right name for it, but it's wherever they take the image that informs you of what gender your child will be. And Mom was going to be at the birth, and that was going to be a big deal. This is a whole new age. My dad didn't even go to my birth. Now my mom was going to go to mine, and as it turned out later, my dad went to one of my kids' birth, along with my oldest brother. When we had the imaging done, it came out that it was going to be a girl, and the technician there was quite certain that this was the case. And I was happy for Diana, and I wasn't sad at all about it. As much as I had thought that I thought a boy should be the first one. Again, I'm not above being a sexist at different points in my life. I was happy. I was happy that there would be a girl coming in, and my mom was absolutely ecstatic. So we made plans, and we actually went to a store where they did the same kind of imaging, and they put music to it, and we had another one done, and we sent videos to friends and family of this girl that was inside Diana. And the months proceeded, and Diana's belly grew bigger, and the anticipation from my mother grew greater. My own anticipation grew greater. And the day arrived. And as it turned out, my mother had been kind of sick and could not make it down to the birth. It was about a 45-minute drive from where they lived. And she was sick to her stomach. She just could not bear the thought of coming down the canyon to see this birth. And the birth happened, and there were all kinds of problems. The way I've told people about it is, imagine anything that can go wrong in a birth, and it happened with the exception of breech. Sarah was not a breech baby, but she was crooked. She was coming out head first, but she wasn't coming out straight. She got stuck. There was bleeding. When she came out, there was not an immediate a cry. It took several, I'm sure it was several just seconds. But even Diana's sister, who was in the room, was a little nervous that it was taking so long. And plus, Diana was beat up pretty badly. But then that voice came out. We could hear it. It was a big relief. I could focus on what was happening with Diana. Neither of us had been able to experience Sarah yet. And they brought her over to Diana, but Diana was kind of out of it because they had her pretty medicated, given the damage that was done. And so they handed her to me. And Sarah gazed into my eyes. Now, I understand that the common thinking is children cannot see clearly for weeks after they're born, that perhaps there are fuzzy images. But I swear that little girl was looking straight at me and into me and through me. And it's an image, and I got to admit that I make the case all the time that our memories are faulty. But that's an image that just won't go away, of looking down and having this gaze into the eyes of this child and seeing her smile. It really looked like she had a contented smile. And I wouldn't blame her if that was the case, but I know that children aren't supposed to be able to smile for weeks and weeks. But she had been poked and prodded and wiped down and gone through all kinds of an ordeal while she was over on that table where there were about 6 people working on her, that she probably was happy to be wrapped up and snug and secure and being held by somebody who was just looking at her. And it was an amazing moment. And I was sad that my mom wasn't there to see it. And it didn't make matters any easier when I didn't call my parents right away to tell them what was happening. I was pretty upset, or pretty serious about everything going on. People that had come to the hospital couldn't go in and see Diana because she was recovering and not necessarily in a good way, and so people could look through the window and see Sarah, and that was about the most they could do. But I hadn't remembered to call my parents, and it had been a long labor. And finally, somehow, the phone, I got handed the phone, and I could tell my parents were upset that I hadn't called. And this is their way. These are things, when we talk about children being mirrors of us. Well, when I say this about my parents, I will say that our parents are mirrors of us too. And they were a little taken back that I had not thought to call them right away with the news. But they were anticipating that this was something simple that we could call and say, yes, everything's fine, everything's great. And I got on the news, and I gave them the news, and I wouldn't say I was short with them, but I didn't want to take a lot of time, and I told them this birth was challenging, and I will call you tomorrow and tell you about it. And so the next day came, and I managed to call them, And I told them exactly everything that had happened. And when they got off the phone, the story is my mother was in tears hearing about everything that Diana and Sarah had gone through just to be born. So my mother decided whatever pain she was in, however bad she felt, she wanted to come down and see this granddaughter of hers. And I didn't know about this until I happened to go out into the parking lot to move my car or do something out there. I don't remember why I was out there. And I saw my parents. And I was just stunned because I knew how sick my mom had been. And my dad told me, she said, if Diana can go through all that, I can make it down the mountain and back. And so she came in. She was able to hold her granddaughter, the first daughter or granddaughter she'd ever had. And you could tell it meant a lot to her. As I said, the birth kind of took a toll on Diana. The whole process did. And so after we went home, and I should say that in the hospital, Diana didn't really have the opportunity to bond with Sarah that she had hoped to. You have these images of this instant bonding with mother and child, and it had been so hard, and the process had been so difficult for Diana that she didn't really feel like she was whole and complete while she was in the hospital. And the stay in the hospital had been a little bit challenging because some of the help wasn't very helpful. But when we went home, I was off for a couple days, but then I went back to work, and I heard when I came home one day, Diana saying, "I am so in love with this little girl." And it was a great moment because it had taken a while to arrive at that point. Diana had always been great with kids. She'd always been everybody's favorite aunt. But now she had finally bonded with her own child. Because Diana was in kind of a fragile state, we didn't go up to my parents a lot. And it was, in fact, a couple of weeks before we got to go up to Midway. It was about a 45-minute to an hour drive to go up to where my parents lived, and Diana just wasn't up for it. So after a couple of weeks, we had been in constant contact with both my parents, and we were living in the home of Diana's parents, or Diana's mother. And Dad called a couple weeks later, and he said, well, we got some news. Now, I mentioned that my mom had been sick. What I didn't say before was that she had been sick for quite a while, and it was not horrible sickness at first, but it was annoying. And the main problem that she was experiencing was that she had just lost her appetite, and she had kind of a bloated stomach. And they thought it might be what's called a Bezor, which I still couldn't tell you what that is. But doctors had tried to look at what it might be, and in fact, my mom had delayed going to the doctor because, well, you know, people get sick, they get over it. And Mom had had serious illnesses before, but had always come through it, and she just didn't see this as anything to worry about. So she didn't for a while, and it was probably about a month before Sarah was born that my dad finally convinced her to go to the doctor. And by the time Sarah was born, they had no idea still what was going on, and there were all kinds of tests that they did that would not reveal anything. They considered all kinds of possibilities. When my dad called that day, what they had learned was that the doctor wanted both my parents to go in and see him. they wanted him to come into the office, and they wouldn't tell him over the phone what was going on. And so we knew this, and it kind of changed things. We didn't know what it was, but a doctor doesn't ask you to come in, both of you, unless it's something fairly serious. And when the doctors finally were able to talk to him, the doctor was apologetic. And he said, "I'm sorry, I'm afraid we found that you have cancer." And when we come back, I will tell you about how that played out and about how my mother got to experience my daughter and how that relationship developed and how that news rippled throughout the family and what kind of bonding and coming together it caused for my mother to hear this news and for the time that she had with her Sarah. So when we come back, we'll talk about the rest of that piece of the story, and we'll go on to other parts of it, include remembering why I brought up the part about children mirroring ourselves. And there's more to this story about my mom's wish for a daughter. And when we come back, we'll get into all of that.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Barbara Klein. NATO is condemning Russia's military escalation in Crimea, calling it a breach of international law. Ukraine's new prime minister says Russia has effectively declared war by taking control of Crimea. No shots have been fired, but world leaders are calling on Russia to back down before the crisis escalates further. Military bases in the autonomous region are surrounded. Jessica Gallagher reports on the scene at the port city of Sevastopol, where gunmen arrived at a Ukrainian infantry base.
Witnesses say the convoy includes 4 armored vehicles with mounted machine guns and some 13 troop vehicles containing around 30 soldiers each. The vehicles have Russian license plates. Ukrainian soldiers are not being permitted to enter or leave the base. Meanwhile, hundreds of Russian troops are on their way to the capital of Crimea, Simferopol. Ukraine's newly installed prime minister says his country is on the brink of disaster and is asking Russian President Vladimir Putin to pull his troops back. Putin has maintained that the Kremlin has a right to protect its interests here. For NPR News, I'm Jessica Gallagher in Sevastopol.
In Nigeria, some 90 people are dead in separate attacks by suspected Islamist insurgents. Militants set a village on fire, totally destroying it. And in the nearby city of Maiduguri, at least 50 people were killed in 2 blasts. The city is known as the birthplace of Boko Haram, the Islamist insurgents group the government blames for several deadly attacks. NPR's Ophabia Quist-Arcton reports.
Children dancing at a wedding party were among those killed in Maiduguri, as well as people watching soccer on an outdoor TV screen. So say survivors of the double explosions. They report that the first blast came from a passenger car and avoided many casualties. But as people rushed to help those victims, a second explosion blew up a pickup truck full of wood, killing many others. This latest attack is a major setback to a new offensive announced by Nigeria's security forces days ago, pledging to intensify the crackdown on the Islamic uprising. The anti-government and anti-Western terror group Boko Haram has confounded a Nigerian army and air force campaign, attacking at will and killing hundreds of civilians in recent months. Ophabia Quist-Arcton, NPR News, Accra.
The Chinese government is blaming Muslim separatists for a deadly attack at a railway station in southwest China yesterday. At least 29 people were knifed to death. More than 100 are injured. Chinese officials say separatist forces are from Xinjiang, where some Muslim Uyghurs are battling Chinese rule. Police in Washington, D.C. have arrested dozens of protesters demonstrating against the Keystone XL pipeline. Some in the crowd, of mostly college students, tied themselves to the White House fence and demanded President Obama reject the project. This is NPR. The U.S. Navy says a fighter jet that crashed yesterday in Nevada is a total loss, and crews continue to search for the pilot. Officials say it took crews several hours to reach the crash site because of a snowstorm and remote mountainous terrain. The supersonic combat jet went down during a training exercise. Only a few hours left until the Academy Awards ceremony gets underway. People who make movies and their fans are excited, as are local businesses, for whom the Oscars have become as golden as the Oscar statuette. As Danielle Carson reports, millions of dollars get pumped into hotels, restaurants, and limo companies for the big event.
Hollywood loves award shows, People's Choice, the Golden Globes, and Screen Actors Guild. But the crown jewel is the Academy Awards. According to research firm Micronomics, the show brings in almost $70 million to LA's coffers. That includes $2 million in limousine rentals and $6 million for post-Oscar parties. Economist Kevin Clouden did the math for hotel stays.
Let's say 1,000 people coming in for the Oscars are simply reserving nice hotel rooms at $350 a night, and let's say they stay for 2 nights, that's $7 million right there.
There's also a ripple effect. Many visitors will pony up the cash to see sites like Disneyland and Universal Studios. For NPR News, I'm Danielle Carson in Los Angeles.
The Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race gets underway today in Willow, Alaska. 69 mushers and their dog teams will try to make it across 1,000 miles of unforgiving terrain to Nome, Alaska. The competitors come from several countries this year, including Norway, New Zealand, even Jamaica. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News in Washington.
Hey, it's Kevin with the Outlaw Radio Network. When it came time for the guys with Outlaw Radio to get our tuxes for the Habitat for Humanity of Kitsap County's Raise the Roof event, we honestly had no idea where to get them. Then we found Judy at Judy's Sewing in East Bremerton. As evidenced by the name, Judy's Sewing does tailoring, alterations, and repair. She also does tuxedo rentals starting at $69, bridal party dresses for $69, and bride's dresses starting at only $189. Plus, we also learned that at Judy's Sewing, not only does she offer military members prices that are lower than they're going to find at the Navy Exchange, she also prioritizes their orders. That means if you're in the military, your needs move right to the front of the line. It's a special touch of service you can only get from a locally based business like Judy's Sewing. Judy's Sewing at the corner of Fairgrounds Road in Central Valley in East Bremerton, right near Handy Andy's. Or call Judy at 360-662-1212. 662-1212. Judy's Sewing, a local business that's proud to support her community.
Paladin Data Systems is in the business of successful technology product deployment. Paladin Data Systems provides information management products and solutions to government agencies and others that need a trusted, experienced technology partner. Paladin's core philosophy is simple: do right, do our best, and treat others the way we would like to be treated. Paladin Data Systems is also a proud sponsor of the Habitat for Humanity of Kitsap County. Find out more about Paladin Data Systems online at paladindata.com. Paladin Data Systems. Innovation, integrity, results.
Markets is a new company based right here in Kitsap County, committed to providing your business with the total marketing and printing solutions. From awards and plaques to calendars and planners and everything in between, Markets can handle your promotional needs. Plus, since Markets is a small company, they can offer lower prices and quality customer service. If you need to get your business name out there, you need to call Markets, 360-633-7931, or visit them online at mark-itz.com.
As Kitsap County's largest maintenance provider, Team Innovative in Paulsbo provides commercial and residential maintenance to hundreds of millions of dollars of local real estate. With services including parking lot maintenance and street cleaning to landscape and design, Team Innovative is committed to using a green approach and following a strong environmental conscience. Team Innovative Services, 697-6858, or visit them online at getinnovative.net. Team Innovative Services, get serious, get innovative.
Once again from a garage and a home in Silverdale, Washington, which is near Seattle, home of the 2014 Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. And I promise I won't keep bugging you about that. If you're not from here, you probably don't care. Or if you care, you're probably not happy about it. And I don't want to lose you as a fan, so I'll stop reminding you that Seattle finally has a world championship in the game of professional football. This is Field of Steve. This is the live webcast version of Field of Steve. If you are listening to this on Edge Media Source between 3 and 5 Pacific time on Sundays, this is not, however, being recorded live. I mean, I am live, and I am currently at this moment recording this live, but you're not hearing it as I speak it. You're hearing this a day later. It is early, 1:39 in the morning on a Saturday, and I have to go to work in a few hours at my day job as a reporter for the Kitsap Sun, and so I am recording this before the show actually airs. And lucky for you, I'm not going to edit it as if I'm going to pretend that it is actually live, so you're going to hear me stammer and employ whatever uhs I have in my arsenal in all the ands and ums and buts and so-ons and howevers. That's the beauty of recorded live radio, or fake radio, as if you will. Field of Steve can be heard, in addition to being heard here on Edge Media Source, can be heard on fieldofsteve.com. And if you want to email me, which is something I would love for you to do, and later in the show I'll go into an email I received, contact me at Stephen@thenarrativearts.com. Stephen with a V at thenarrativearts.com. And you can contact me, and I would love to answer your questions on the air as part of this wonderful show. My thanks to Edge Media Source, the folks like Kevin, Paul, and Caleb, who helped make this show possible. And I'll remind you that there are other shows on this network that are worth listening to. In fact, if you're listening to this show, you probably already know about the other shows. There is the Raw Nerve that goes on after this one. There is the Outlaw Radio Network after the Raw Nerve. And there's The Last Call, which contains lots of naughty bits. Now, when I left you, I had told you, and it feels kind of funny to go from a little bit of light humor, or supposed humor, to going back to this serious bit of news that I told you as I left. As I mentioned, Diana and I had a baby girl. We had always, we had decided early that we wanted children. Earlier than we had expected, after we got married, that my mother, who had always wanted a girl, was excited and thrilled at the news that we were going to have one, but we had planned on her attending the birth, and she was unable to because she was sick. Later, we're finding out why she was so sick, and it was that she had cancer. Now, of course, you might understand that this was stunning news to all of us, and not the least of which my mother. My mother was probably the most okay with this news of any of us, because we were not expecting that this would be a time in her life that she would spend leaving us. She was 65 years old, but death didn't seem part of the immediate plans. What the doctors told her initially was that she might be able to count on 1 to 5 years. It would take some more testing to know exactly what she had, but they suspected that it was stomach cancer. And something we learned about stomach cancer over the next several weeks made those initial prognostications absolutely wrong. The next time we saw my mother was when she came to the hospital for some tests, and the hospital was closer to where we lived than where she lived. And when we got in there, that's when the tears started flowing. Both Diana and my mother and me. My father, not so much. My father was not a crier, but I could tell that this had moved him. And over the next few weeks, I saw my father become tender in a way that I don't think I'd ever experienced before or since. I mean, and actually, I will say that later on, he was that way with my wife as well. Just the appreciation that he had for my mother in those weeks was so apparent. Even as the tears were being shed, however, my mother was relishing the opportunity of holding our little Sarah. And these were notes that she shared with my aunt, her sister, her half-sister. How much, and just like my mother, she apologized for bragging, but how beautiful Sarah was. and how she just wanted to hold her. But she was pretty sure that the time wasn't going to allow her to do so much. And as it turned out, she learned fairly quickly that 1 to 5 years had been highly optimistic, because the next time she saw a doctor, the doctor said maybe a year. And so we committed as much as we could to spend as much time as we could with my mother. A hospice bed was set up in the house she lived in, and what the hospice nurses told her was, decide what you want to do with the rest of your, the time you have. And the one last thing she wanted to do was to go to Oregon to see the coast. And that was probably on a Thursday. And by Friday, on a Friday, she went to see an oncologist. And she was not eager to do this. She was not going to do chemotherapy, none of that. She had no inclination to do that. Remember, she had worked in a hospital. She had seen what people had gone through, who had gone through this, and she had had friends go through chemotherapy, and she saw how the quality of life had not been, the quality of life had been diminished far more than it was worth for the extra weeks or months that they got in return. She was not interested in that at all, despite the fact that she had this granddaughter. The one thing she said in her letters to her sister was the one thing that made her consider doing any of this was Sarah. And in the end, it wasn't to be, and I won't belabor the point. The next doctor she saw, the oncologist, said, if your son, who my oldest brother is who he was talking about, wants to see you alive, tell him he better come now. And he lived in Hawaii, so it was no small feat to get him home. But my other brother had frequent flyer miles, and they were able to apply those to my brother to get him quickly on a plane. And he got there on a Saturday morning. And other people started arriving, including my mom's sister. And by Monday night, we got film of my mom holding Sarah. On Monday night, my mom passed away. And that was the end. 27 days. Sarah was born March 31st, 1998. My mother died April 27th, 1998. And so my mom had 27 days of her life to enjoy something she had wanted all of her life. A little girl. After she died, my brothers and my dad and I were sitting in the house, and my brother Mike stated his belief that my mother would be Sarah's guardian angel. We are religious people. We believe in angels, and angels is a term for people on the other side taking special care to watch over people here. And it was comforting to believe that. It's comforting to think that. After Mom's funeral, there still was the notion, or the reality, that we had a little girl to raise. And so that's what Diana and I went about the business doing, raising this little girl, who proved herself immediately to be brilliant, to be as sharp and as smart. And I'm not bragging. I'm being absolutely honest here. Sarah was brilliant. She was a smart child. And anywhere we'd go, we'd hear from people who said, "Oh, she is smart." And I didn't want to believe it because, like my mother, I didn't want to brag. But it was absolutely true. She was smart. And she was cute. And she and I had a pretty good relationship. We went on stroller rides with her, and before we left there, a couple years later, Diana gave birth to our son Sasha. And my relationship with Sasha wasn't as tight as the one with Sarah. and it was a little bit more challenging. But Sarah and I always clicked, and we would go for walks in this double stroller. I'd push the stroller after work, and we'd walk over towards this forest, and it was agreed between me and Sarah that we wouldn't go in that forest because it was the 100-acre woods and Tigger might bounce on us, those kind of things. These are stories that probably every father that's paid attention to a child can share, so I won't belabor the point. But Sarah, being smart as she was, we had no problems with her in school. She did really well. In fact, she was put in the smart kids class and had to move to another school and create new friends, and really did well. She excelled. And then around age 13, things kind of changed. Things grew to be a little dark with Sarah. And this is where this whole notion of children being a mirror of us, it was real easy to believe that when all Sarah was doing was being brilliant and warm and engaging. Had no problem believing the mirror part. It even made it easy to accept the sensitive part of Sasha. Sasha really didn't want much to do with me for a lot of his early years. He and I get along great now. And it didn't take long before that changed. But, you know, all of those things were easy. But when Sarah started distancing herself from us, that's when the whole notion of these children being a mirror of us kind of becomes a stretch or a challenge to believe. And yet we persisted. We wanted the best for her. She withdrew and wouldn't talk to us. And this went on for about a year. And we were able to see some of the things she wrote. And some of the things she wrote with her friends were copying vile things that she had seen on different websites or in books that we had no idea how she got a hold of. Things got challenging. And the worst part of it was we worried that she might be suicidal. You don't know what it's like as a parent, or maybe you do. In fact, maybe some of you have gone through far worse. So I apologize if I minimize whatever you might have gone through, but I will tell you that it is a pit beyond belief to wonder or to worry that one day you might come home and your child who has expressed a wish to die actually went through with it. In late 2012, my father died, and in early 2013, we moved out of the house that we had lived in with him. We had taken care of him in his later years until we couldn't do it any longer. And the house we lived in wasn't right for our family. So it was time to move on, and we did. That's abbreviating that part of the story, but that's not pertinent here. At any rate, we moved into a new house, and still we kind of struggled with Sarah and what she was going through. And one day I came home, or I sat and talked to Diana, and she said, I have something to share with you. And it was a letter. Now it reminds you that Sarah's place in my larger family's history was pretty profound, because her existence as a girl had broken through a seeming logjam of boys that had dominated my side of the family. All my cousins, my direct cousins, are girls, with the exception of some half cousins, I guess you would call them. My dad's brother had 6 girls. They actually had a boy who died early early when he was little. And my other uncle had 2 girls. So girls had dominated 2 families in the Gardner chain, but it was boys on one side, and it was looking like it was going to continue to be that way. Boys, boys, boys. And then Sarah comes along and changes everything and gives a gift to my mother for 27 days of my mother's life. So the letter that we received from Sarah was to tell us that she had something very difficult to tell us, but because she loved us, and that right there was a breakthrough. Weeks before, I had asked her if she wanted to be happy because I was so frustrated with what my experience was with her. And she wouldn't answer me. So I'd let it pause for a minute and I'd say, Sarah, do you want to be happy? She wouldn't answer. Sarah, do you want to be happy? She wouldn't answer. Did it probably 4 times. Could not get an answer out of her. And this letter that we received made it clear why. Sarah was telling us that for a couple of years she had known something that she was thinking for the longest time that she would not tell us until she turned 18. But the news was that she believed she was a boy. That she was male. That though she had been born with a female's body, she believed that she had the spirit of a male. And she told us that she wanted to be known as Quinn from that point on. And that many things were negotiable, but that was not. Now, in the next couple of minutes, I'm only going to deal with the immediate aftermath of that letter. While it is a shock beyond belief to get that kind of note from your child, and I will tell you, absolutely, this was nothing I was prepared for. I was prepared to hear that she was gay. I was not prepared to hear that she might be transgender, that she might be he. None of that was anything I had ever considered. So I can also, with that said, I can also understand people who have a hard time understanding how that works. And hopefully I'll be able to explain some of that in the next segment. But in reality, as shocking as it was, my first thought, and this was not something that I had to tell myself to think, but my first inclination felt like my chest had opened up and my heart had been revealed, and I was so thankful. Not that I wished this upon my child, not that I thought this was good or bad, any of that. Not that I had any judgment about the news. It was the fact that our oldest child was talking to us again, communicating with us. If you remember, it had just been a few weeks before when I had tried to ask then Sarah whether she wanted to be happy, and she could not answer. Now we were hearing something that had to be extremely difficult for anyone to reveal. And having been in a religious family, our child must have considered that as part of the difficulty in revealing it, and yet had the courage to do it anyway, and also had the faith to trust us that we would do it with what we could. But the real courage came in the fact that as much as Sarah, who had become Quinn, knew about us, there was no way to know whether we would be accepting or whether we would reject the child, because we were being confronted with something that we had not ever considered. And when I say there was no way of knowing, there was no way for Quinn to know, no way for Sarah, now Quinn, to know how we would react. And not only did Quinn trust us, not only was that part of it, but even if there wasn't a trust, there was a willingness to accept whatever response we would have. And that this child of ours was going to live his life on his own terms, living the truth that he knew for himself. And when we come back, I'll go into some of the steps we took to deal with this new reality. And I think you'll find it instructive, and you may learn something about what it means to be transgender. When we come back, we'll go into all of that.
Coinforce.com is your headquarters for superior quality challenge coins, proudly serving military and non-military customers worldwide. Located near the main gate of McChord Air Force Base and close to Fort Lewis, Coinforce.com is owned and operated by retired military veterans. Coinforce.com understands your needs and are proud to continue serving the military community in our own special way. For an undisputed best value, extreme quality, and superior customer service, when you're looking for the world's largest selection of challenge coins, visit Coinforce.com, owned and operated by retired military veterans.
In 2008, Governor Sarah Palin came out of nowhere to stun the political world and become arguably the most exciting political figure of this generation. Hi, my name is Frank Aquila, and in 2008, I lobbied for Governor Palin to be on that presidential ticket as a chairman for Senator John McCain. I just wrote Sarah Palin Out of Nowhere, where I explain why Governor Palin is right for America. See it on Amazon or go to www.sarahpalinoutofnowhere.com.
The Legacy Group in Silverdale is a well-respected independent mortgage banker, absolutely committed to helping Kitsap County families on their path to home ownership. As an employee-owned company, the Legacy Group has a strong stake in your success, and they want to be your lifetime partner in helping you develop a strong real estate portfolio. Call the Legacy Group in Silverdale today at 698-6440 and find out how they can help you get started on the road to home ownership. 698-6440 for the Legacy Group, a lending experience that's a little different and a lot smarter.
The Yacht Club Broiler is Silverdale's premier dining establishment and has been for over 20 years. Come experience the Yacht Club Broiler's famous happy hour with a casual and friendly atmosphere. Free Wi-Fi service is now available. The Yacht Club Broiler is open 7 days a week for lunch and dinner at 9226 Bayshore Drive in Silverdale. The Yacht Club Broiler, Silverdale's premier dining establishment.
Ish Vintage Clothing and Costumes in Bremerton is your home for quality vintage clothing and costumes and accessories. At Ish, you can purchase the outfit of your choice, or you can rent it. Every rental comes with free accessories you need to complete the outfit, such as belts, purses, jewelry, scarves, hair accessories, and more. Come visit us at Ish Vintage Clothing and Costumes at 249 4th Street in Bremerton.
As Kitsap County's largest maintenance provider, Team Innovative in Paulsbo provides commercial and residential maintenance to hundreds of millions of dollars of local real estate. With services including parking lot maintenance and street cleaning to landscape and design, Team Innovative is committed to using a green approach and following a strong environmental conscience. Team Innovative Services, 697-6858, or visit them online at getinnovative.net. Team Innovative Services, get serious, get innovative.
Welcome back to the final segment of Field of Steve on this March 2nd, 2014. And I've told you quite a bit, haven't I? I've told you something you probably weren't expecting to hear. But it is a story nonetheless that I think is worth telling. It might be instructive and might have value to folks who are out there listening to it. Again, this is Field of Steve on the Edge Media Source. Being broadcast live, being webcast live from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time on edgemediasource.com, and also as a podcast later on fieldofsteve.com. You can find all the old episodes of Field of Steve at fieldofsteve.com, This is the second time that I've been on Edge Media Source, and I had quite a few episodes before this, so if I seem really good at this, that's why, because I've had lots and lots of practice. Again, I go into at the beginning of the show about how doing it live is quite a bit different experience. And before I keep meandering on to subjects like this, I don't want to delay telling the rest of this story anymore, because I kind of left you with a lot before the last break. In case you can't remember, my mother always wanted a girl. When Diana and I got married and had our first baby, Sarah, as her name would suggest, was a girl. Mom was happy. She died 27 days later. My mother died 27 days later, but for the last 27 days of her life, she had a girl. And then this girl, who was brilliant, and still is brilliant, told us when she was just about to turn 15 years old that she, in fact, was male. And so there we are as parents, having never considered this. And in my conversations with Diana, my first words to Diana were how happy I was that this child of ours was communicating with us, something we had been missing for quite some time. In fact, we were worried that we would come home and find Sarah gone one day. And now the doors were open. But this required a huge learning curve, because one of the things I considered was, I thought, well, is this something that people can believe about themselves because of the literature that they read? And we hadn't really put a tight control on what our child would read, and we knew that some of the things she was reading were not things that we'd be really thrilled with. But we started talking to people. We started first we were referred to some websites that one of which was specific to Mormon people about gays, lesbians, and transgender. And here's over the next several weeks, a few things we learned. That LGBT, you hear that term a lot. That's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Unless it means transsexual, which is a different thing. But transgender is often lumped in with LGBT. And it should be. It is in the right ballpark, but it is not the same thing. Lesbian and gay is a term for sexual preference. Transgender is a term for gender identity, for sexual identity. There's a big difference. Somebody can be born a woman and identify as a man and still like men. So they can be a transgender male who is gay, or it can be a transgender male who is straight. The two things, as I said, are in the same ballpark, but they're not the same thing. Over the next several weeks, we first of all spoke with a counselor that we had been having our child see, and the counselor applauded our child for revealing what was true. And in that situation, this counselor let us know that while there are people who experiment with homosexuality, people do not experiment with transgender. And so I will tell you this, and I'm a reporter, and so I have to be careful about when I express an opinion, but this is the way that it's been explained to me, that people don't do this as a phase. They don't go through phases where they say, maybe I'm a man or maybe I'm a woman. That is not how it works. When they are willing to come out and say that this is who I am, it is so rare that somebody will later take it back and say, I was wrong. It happens, but it's rare. And so there are cases in California right now, because California has passed a law that allows students at schools and public schools to go to the bathrooms and locker rooms for the gender they identify with. And a lot of the hubbub and a lot of the opposition to that has been, well, what if a boy does this just because he wants to see women naked? And I will tell you that no boy will decide to identify as a woman. They will joke about it, but they won't actually go through with it just so that they can see naked women. Besides, it is so easy to see nudity anymore anyway. There's no reason that somebody would do that just to see their peers naked. So these stories down in California about kids doing that, those are garbage. Now, people might have other problems with, there's another case recently where a child who was born a boy and is identified a boy and even played freshman baseball at Azusa High School in Azusa, California, which is not far from where I grew up, is now playing on the girls' softball team and identifies as a woman. And what struck me about the story that I read was how the other coaches on other teams had no problem with it. So I will tell you that there are a lot of people who are just fine with it. They get it. We were not those people initially. We didn't quite get it. And if you don't get it, if you don't get it on the level that I do, I certainly understand it, because I didn't understand it until I had to immerse myself in this stuff and into this. The bottom line is we love our children and we want them to be happy. And it became clear to this, and I talked to a Mormon man who used to be a Mormon woman, and we talked to a friend who's a counselor. And we came to the conclusion that the only choice there was here was to be completely supportive, to cast no doubts on where our child is going to go, who is at this point going by Quinn. Now, this is a bit of a challenge telling family members. Once we got clear, then it became clear that we had to let our family members know. Diana comes from a family of 9 brothers and sisters, so there's 10 children. Grandmother's still alive. My family, as you know, 2 boys. Both of our parents had passed away. We wrote a letter to our family members, and we shared it perhaps with a couple of friends. And I'm going to go ahead and just read the letter to you, and if I end up skipping over some parts, it's not the plan right now. Here's how the letter goes. We have a bit of news about Sarah to share with you. This is not a secret, so feel free to forward this email to whoever you feel will benefit. For about the past year and a half, our relationship with Sarah was extremely challenging. There was a tangible darkness, perhaps not so much in her, but in our relationship with her. She hit some lows that no parent would ever want to see their child go through. One day recently, Steve asked her several times if she wanted to be happy, and she wouldn't answer. We have been overwhelmed with helplessness in trying to figure out how to get her to communicate to us. We won't go into a lot of details, but we had reason to worry about whether we would one day find her gone, in more than one sense. Then, a few weeks ago, she wrote us a letter that she said was very difficult to write, but had to tell us because we're her parents and she loves us and we deserve to know her for who she is. She is transgender. Not a suicide note or running away note or any other life-threatening thing, which were all things that we had a small taste of before, but that she has a female's body with a male's mind. She's known for quite a while but has kept it hidden. She thought maybe it would be easier to pretend until she was an adult, but it became too hard to keep it down. Sarah has asked to go by the name of Quinn and to use male pronouns when talking about her. From this point on, she will have begun a transformation of living her life as a male. I know this comes as a shock to all of you, just as it did to us. We will always stand by Quinn's side and support and love him, just as we do Sasha and Apollo. The greatest chance at a happy, healthy life is for Quinn to feel love and support from those that are closest, friends and family. There's a high rate of suicide, drug use, etc. for those who feel they don't have support. The life he has ahead of him will definitely not be an easy one, but it'll be much easier than the way he was living before. That's the thing that gives us the most hope, that we actually have a relationship now. Quinn is reaching out to us again and is happy. What more could a parent want? Since receiving the letter, we have done a lot of research and talked to people who we believed could offer insight. We'll provide some links for you to read to help you understand. Diana spoke with a close friend who is a family member who has gone through this. Steve spoke with an LDS man who used to be an LDS woman. We spoke with 2 therapists, one who is a close friend of ours. We have gone through the stages of grief. There has been sadness, anger, denial, all of it. And let me tell you that the stages of grief don't just happen once. We are still going through it. The bottom line, though, is we support our child in this. Sarah is now Quinn. We ask that you do the same. The difference in Sarah/Quinn since she came to terms with this, which we noticed weeks before we got the letter, has been remarkable. We would be happy to talk to you about this and give you more details of our own process of dealing with this. Seriously, we will be glad to talk about it because it not only might help you in understanding the situation, it always helps us to be able to confide in someone. One of the bigger challenges for us was trying to explain this to Apollo. Steve drew upon a lesson he gave in his mission about the plan of salvation. You take one hand and explain that the hand represents who we are in spirit. In this life we are given a body. Then you put the glove on your hand to represent the body. While turning the glove around so it doesn't quite fit right, Steve explained that for some people in this world, the body they are given doesn't match who they are in spirit. And that is what has happened for Sarah. We can't say Apollo got it right away, but he's no different from the rest of us, and that we have to get used to saying Quinn and he and him. The name part is easy. The gender part, not so much. Perhaps you would like to share this with your families. As parents, the most important hope we have for any of our children is for them to grow up to become happy adults. We have loved our life with Sarah and look forward to our continued relationship with Quinn. Thank you for your love and support. Love, Steve and Diana. Now, just as Quinn had taken a risk when he wrote his letter to us, we took a risk in revealing this to family, but it was time. And we were willing to take whatever kind of feedback we got. We were willing to hear it. But there was no question in my mind and no question in Diana's that we were going to be a solid stand for our son. And as it turned out, the response was so heartwarming. Family members we didn't expect to understand, understood, and in fact knew of people in similar situations. They immediately adopted the name Quinn. There were a couple who struggled with it, who didn't quite get it. And while that challenged us and gave us maybe a little bit of pain at first, we also came to understand because it was a challenge for us. And since we are right with this situation, it was easier for us to make the quick transition from seeing our oldest child as Sarah to now seeing him as Quinn. As I said in the letter, the pronouns were the hardest part. And I'll be honest, they still are. Those stages of grief, they've kind of diminished now. There really isn't much grief about this anymore. This has been about 1 year ago that this all came to be. Since then, we've assisted Quinn in making the adjustment. And in fact, one of the things, I'll talk about the thing about the name Quinn in just a minute, because there is a development there. But we assisted in making the adjustment. He was in junior high at the time. We talked with the principal and the assistants there, and they gave us lots of help. As he went into high school, they were willing to give us lots of help and making accommodations for our son. After a while, one of the things he realized was that the name he had chosen for himself could apply to both a male or female, a man or a woman, a boy or a girl. And so he asked us to choose a different name for him. We kept it as Quinn for a while until the school year was out. And then he asked us whether we were willing to make a decision. And Diana and I made a decision as we had in the past. We just picked a name we liked. So the child who was once Sarah and was once Quinn has now become Joshua. It was just, again, there was no symbolism in the name. It was just a name we liked. And we went with that. There have been, as we mentioned, there were the stages of grief that went through this. But it is one of those things where we are learning as we go. And it is becoming easier. And in fact, I will say for my own self, I look forward to his further development as a man. My oldest is a man. My 3 sons, if you can remember that in reference. And it also makes me wonder about the gift that this child, Joshua, gave to my mother. Now, I am a spiritual, religious guy. When I say spiritual and religion, I think the two can coexist. I know people like to say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I think both can happen. And I don't have any answers for this. But I sometimes wonder if Josh was sent to us as a girl to bless my mother, if there was something she really needed in having those 27 days of having a granddaughter. And I can tell you that almost every day that our son was our daughter was filled with joy. Almost. Just as almost every day our son, as our son, it gives us days filled with joy. What I will say is that our relationship is much better. The challenges we have with him now are the challenges most parents have with teenagers. And that can be good, and it can be hair loss. It can induce hair loss. But he's a great kid. And we've taken him to a counselor who worked with us through some family issues. It was 4 or 5 sessions with a counselor who specializes in transgender issues. And we learned a lot through that, and learned that what Josh had experienced as a child was pretty typical for transgender children. So confident in the knowledge that Josh is a boy, we're pursuing, or we're embarking on the stages of allowing him to make that transition. And it won't be easy. It may be challenging. It most certainly will be challenging as life goes on. But I see the confidence that he has in who he is that he lacked before, and appreciate the role that he plays in our family, and love him so much. And so for any parents out there wondering about their children, I don't know that there's a lesson here I can give you, because our experience is our experience. But the love of a parent doesn't go away just because of a big change. And in fact, this is really only a change in our perception, probably not so much a change in reality, because the reality always was what it was. We just didn't know it. And I go back to the thought that children are a mirror of us. And in this case, I really hope so. Because what I saw in Josh was somebody so courageous, so brave, so honest, that I can only hope to be the mirror of him. Now, we have a few minutes left, and I'm in a highly inappropriate way. I'm probably going to let it get a little lighter here. If you have questions again about anything that I've said today, I invite you to contact me at Stephen with a V at thenarrativearts.com. Stephen at thenarrativearts.com. If you have questions about anything I've said, or if you want to be critical of me, or if you want to praise me, feel free to write. I haven't been getting many emails, but I did get one. It was somebody named Gabby Stiles, in fact. I was really happy to hear from Gabby. She writes, "Hey, man, dear, this is Gabby," with an exclamation point. You know, I really love exclamation points. "I found your profile via Facebook." Well, I have lots of Facebook friends, so that's not a shock. "I was excited," another exclamation point. Then she says, "You're cute." Wow. Well, I'm getting a little flushed. I want to share some hot... Oh. Yeah, this probably isn't suitable material for this podcast or for this webcast. Maybe on the last call, something like this letter would be appropriate. Not here. As a reminder, if you are interested in hearing this later, the Edge Media Source will have it on their site. EdgeMediaSource.com will have it on their site. You can download it and listen to it or listen to it there. Also, go to fieldofsteve.com and you can listen to it there. And I will say, if you subscribe to it on iTunes, you can have it delivered to your iPhone, your computer, whatever you listen to podcasts on through iTunes. You can do that. So again, it's Field of Steve. And before we go, I want to go through a few things that I will call this week in Steve. I am that narcissistic that I will keep bringing up that my name is Steve. I know it wasn't Adam and Steve; it was Adam and Eve. But I'd like to think that Steve was a possibility. Could have been Steve and Eve. At any rate, this week in Steve, spring training has begun, and I am a diehard Dodger fan. It is the one team, and I bring up the Seahawks, and I have to confess that I am a bandwagon Seahawk fan. I became a fan in 2003, I believe it was, when Matt Hasselbeck said we're going to take the ball and go down and score against the Green Bay Packers. I became a fan in that instant. The fact that he threw an interception that was run back for a touchdown and ended the game and ended the season doesn't matter. I became a Seahawk fan then. But in other moments of my life, I was not a Seahawk fan. So as happy as I was for this victory, I was mostly happy for those of you who are lifers here in Seattle and who haven't had the opportunity to see your team win at all. I know that feeling because I grew up a Dodger fan, having grown up in Southern California. And I should mention that the reason I abandoned the Rams, that was my team as a child, had to do with the owner of the team, had to do with it being football, and had to do with it being had to do with the fact that Steve Young was playing for the San Francisco 49ers, and I had watched Steve Young play in college, and I had never seen and have not seen since any one person who could dominate a game the way Steve Young could. Maybe Vince Young when he was playing for Texas. Maybe Johnny Football. But I still hold out that Steve Young is the best football player I've ever seen on the college level. So I began rooting for the 49ers. But I had no real love there. And once Steve Young was gone, I wasn't a committed 49er fan. So it was real easy to adopt the Seahawks. For one thing, I was living here. For another thing, they were good, so I'm a fair weather fan too. But this Super Bowl was really special, and I think more so it was special for all of you. But spring training, as I said, has begun, and the Dodgers are starting up. And last year, as the season ended, the Dodgers, when they clinched the division, they jumped the fence in Arizona and hopped into the pool. And I had some old friends from Arizona who thought that was really classless, and I took them to task for that and showed them all the ways that Arizona had been classless before. And as a result, I lost that friend. In fact, I lost 2 friends on Facebook over that. And I really wasn't too bothered by that at first, but over time, and I think it was honestly, it was hearing about how some Seahawk fans had been jerks. I thought, I don't want to be a jerk. So I wrote to those 2 former friends and apologized. And they have not refriended me, but that's fine. That's not the point. I've decided that this year I'm not going to be a jerk. So that is my commitment to you, the listeners of Field of Steve, that as excited as I may be about my teams, I am not going to be a jerk. I am going to be a solid citizen. And it goes along with my commitment to myself to not allow myself to get so angry. Finally, one of the things I want to bring up is that this week I had an opportunity, a challenge, a job of writing about a woman who has leukemia. And the story has touched me. She has a 2-year-old boy, and it was quite literally her dying wish that she get to take him to Disneyland. And so the South Kitsap Family Worship Center, which is in Gorst in the old Bryman School site, they're having a fundraiser on Sunday evening, which is tonight as you're listening to this, at 5 o'clock to raise funds for her to take her boy to Disneyland. Now, there exists the real possibility that she won't be around. In fact, there was some question as to whether she would be alive long enough to see this fundraiser on Sunday. She might pull through, might pull a miracle and make it. But the doctors are saying she has months to live at best, and the family is praying for a miracle. So it's really kind of odd to be saying this on a Saturday night when I have no new news about her condition and knowing that this is airing on Sunday. But nonetheless, if you have a moment and wish to contribute, the family has set up the Elise and Joey Miracle Fund at any Wells Fargo branch, or you might go by the church tonight and see a comedy actor, bid on desserts or whatever. Finally, again, you can email me at stephen@thenarrativearts.com if you want to ask me any questions, or if you have any suggestions for shows, for some sites for shows, or some stories that you might know about me that you might want to hear about. I am open to suggestions. Again, thank you so much for taking the time with me. I hope this show has had some value for you. As I often will close my shows, I come back with the promise that we shall speak again. And as I said last week, this time I can say, well, I guess it'll be next week. Again, look for the show on fieldofsteve.com if you don't see it here, or download it on iTunes via Field of Steve. We shall speak again.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor John.